I'm just starting. Okay, good. Starting to talk. Normally, I introduce the speaker. So today I'm going to talk about work I've been doing for the last, actually more than 10 years. I started doing this in 2012 on trying to design the sort of what we call PPEV, integrated residential microgrid. It's a mouthful, but I'll explain what it is in just a moment. I should explain this all work done with my former Ph.D. student, Keshav, who's now working for Pure Cloud, and that's energy efficiency for their data centers. Brad Hine was an undergraduate working with me. He was at Jane Street now. Anais, who's here, and this is part of her work. Actually, some of her slides that I stole with her permission. And Victus, who was part two in last year, who did this part two project with me on layout. So let me just explain what the problem is. If I can get to the next slide. Yes. Okay. So the current trends are basically good in terms of climate, as you all know. The forest fires, different kinds of fires, which put entire neighborhoods into the, and also price of electricity is going up. So this motivates people to say, look, do I really need to be grids? People like John are buying solar panels and putting them up on the rooftops. So that's energy, even if the grid goes down, and they have to pay less. So both reliability and price dictate solar panels. And so there's a huge amount of, and so a huge amount of growth in energy prices. And so what people are doing is putting these panels up. This is because the price of solar has gone way down. So this graph actually is, to my mind, the reason why solar panels are going down. It was $76 watt in 1977. In 2015, it already reached 30 cents. Right now, it's probably in the 25 to 6 cents a watt range. So it's a huge decline in the price of solar. It becomes cost effective to do so. And so people are putting up solar panels quite a lot. And if you look at this is called the experience curve. On the x-axis, I'm showing over here the number of total amount of megawatts of solar that is in the universe, right? At least in the known universe. So solar panels. So 1 megawatt of all that was out there in the 70s. And then now we have 100,000 megawatts, gigawatts of solar. Actually, this is already slightly out of date. China added 154 gigawatts of solar in the first 6 months of 2023.
Really long growth.
Yeah, it's been this log scale. So way down to 100 down to basically, so gigawatts is like 100 nuclear power stations have been added in China, which is incredible. It's just outstandingly great. So the only closest one that I could find in the speed is cell phone growth. So here's the kind of looking at if you can normalize things, cell phone growth over here, there's this light blue line. And then this is panel growth. So it looks like solar panels are much faster growing than cell phones. Actually, they have parallel trends. Why they have parallel trends in a log scale is completely different. It doesn't make any sense. It's log scale on the y-axis and linear on the x-axis. 2000 for cell phones in years since 2010 for solar, but it has very similar trends. So the part of the thing is you have this positive feedback loop. The most you ship, the cheaper it gets because you have experience in building things, and the cheaper it gets, the more you ship, and you have to go round and round. And this is what's called a positive feedback loop, right? And this is a positive feedback loop that we really love. It really allows us to have some hope that we can avoid, some climate change, the worst effects of climate change, and in particular, it looks like we will reach peak coal usage this year. Most likely, our overall fossil fuel consumption for energy is going to start declining from 2023 already. It was expected to be 2027, but because of all the it's going down. But there's a problem, right? This is a great day. This black line is a day we have no clouds, but when you have a lot of clouds, you get this kind of very zigzaggy thing, especially around here. And so what you need is to decouple supply and demand, and so you need storage. You want to allow basically reliability and flexibility. Flexibility meaning I want to charge my battery now, I'm going to use it later. You also need reliable, it's a cloudy day. And the next 2 days are cloudy, what are you going to do? Well, batteries allow you to do storage. And the nice thing is prices for batteries are also coming down. So on the same kind of cumulative production, when I'm showing megawatts and megawatt hours for battery, and then on the y-axis, I'm showing the price in US dollars, That was the curve I showed you earlier in green. And storage has been going down this curve. So there isn't an updated curve since 2014 I could find. This is from Bloomberg. They don't seem to have come up. But at any rate, we think we're still on this curve over here. And which means that storage price is also coming down. And there's going to be a rapid drop in the in the price of storage once we have cars getting second life batteries to use. So cars are right now have high density batteries, and but when they get to 80% of capacity, they're going to be not usable for travel anymore because the range will go down. And so those will become repurposed for home storage. So your home storage prices are expected to drop significantly in about 2025 or so. So that's roughly speaking when the first set of batteries are going up. Yeah.
Can I have a question about this? This is considering the depletion of the stocks of lithium in the world, like, or we have like enough material for producing these batteries? Like,
yeah. So the question is, what about lithium? Are you going to run out of lithium? We might run out of lithium, but there's a lot of lithium in seawater. Right. And when John doesn't have when John has excess energy, he can actually take seawater into the extract reason for powering something to extract lithium from seawater. So all the excess solar can be used for this. Also, all the car manufacturers, pretty much all of them, are recycling lithium, and I think it's cost efficient to do that. And then finally, there are other technologies, sodium-based batteries, and so on. So there's a huge amount of money to be made on batteries. So anybody who knows chemistry is basically doing battery research, because if they can understand how to crack the lithium problem, they can sell to cars, they can sell to laptops, to cell phones, to energy companies. So it's $1 trillion. So anybody who has any interest in this is trying to solve it. So I don't know how to solve it. I'm hoping something, but price trends look pretty good. So this kind of stuff is in the news. A lot of people are selling solar and storage. A substantial fraction of people who buy solar are also putting in storage, which is unimaginable even a few years ago. I mean, it's again, John has storage, but 10 years ago, you would not have considered putting in storage. Exorbitantly expensive. I mean, even now, it's not cheap, but it's on the edge of affordability. 2 years from now, it will be affordable.
I think it's 8 kilowatt generation of full capacity.
Yeah.
For a battery, it costs 6 times less than the solar panels and can store about 5 hours worth of generated.
Yeah.
So it's the same cells internally as most of the EVs use. It's a bigger form factor.
Yeah.
Cheaper.
People get stationary, there's no need for it to be energy dense, so you get that. The size of a big fridge that you hang on the wall. But there is more. So the thing is, the next thing that's happening is electric vehicles. So here I'm showing the penetration of electric vehicles, which are about 0.2% of all sales in 2013, but in 2022, 13% for electric vehicles or plug-in hybrids. So the market share has gone up again exponentially, right? And so you have yet another form of energy storage. This is the form of electric vehicles. And which means that in addition to having these solar panels on the rooftop, you're also probably going to have an electric car, right? And my house doesn't look this big, but I also have solar panels on the rooftop. It's an electric car. And I'd like to say I'm driving on sunshine. This is sort of true. I mean, I'm driving my car when the sun shines. And so this is pretty good. But there are 3 pragmatic issues we need to solve. And so this idea of there's going to be a lot of solar, a lot of storage and so on is already obvious around 2010, 2011. So we started working on this in 2012. I said, this is going to happen, but here are 3 problems. How much should you buy? How many panels should you buy? How are you going to place it? And which part of the roof are you going to place it? Because you start thinking about it, we'll see later in the talk, placement is actually very, very complicated. And finally, when do you charge and discharge the storage, right? When do you charge and you discharge turns out to be quite complicated. So we call this a sizing, placement, and operation problem. And unfortunately, they're coupled. So let me talk about sizing, how it's done today. So Tesla used to have this calculator earlier to say, how big is your house? How many square feet is your house? And what's the average monthly bill? From that, it'll tell you how much to buy. Basically, how big is your wallet? And how much you have to say something big. And National Renewable Energy Laboratory in the United States had a far more complicated thing, but you have to know everything about your efficiency of your system and so on. It's quite complicated. What we wanted to do was to basically be something like this. We wanted to have it data-driven. So if you have your past electricity bills, and so you know roughly how much energy you have, and you know your location, and you want to find the most economic combination of solar and storage. So you meet a particular target called loss of load probability. It's not loss of load in that you're going to not have any electricity. It's basically the probability that you're going to have to rely on the grid. So you can say, I want to be in off grid, and then your loss of load probability would be 20%. So 20% of the time you have to rely on the grid, so the time you can be on your own. So that's one thing. The second thing, you want to be practical using limited historical data and what's load and solar data. And in fact, you want to be robust. You want to be confident that what you build is going to still meet your purpose, despite the future being unknown. Like, we don't know what the future load is going to look like exactly. We know the future solar is going to look like exactly. So how can you be sure that your sizing actually works? Those were the goals we set forth, and so I'm going to show you like a sketch done behind this. So there were 6 or 7 papers with the details of. So let me tell you what the problem is. So we have some PV input. So that's kind of a cloudy, just a cloudy day with some sun and peaks and then stuff going up and down. So that's your solar trace, right? So we're giving you able to obtain solar traces that are representative for your location fairly easily for almost anywhere in the world these days. So that's your solar input. That PV input plus what you buy from the grid either needs the load or it goes into the battery. And then what the battery discharges, what comes directly, either goes to the grid if you're selling it, or it goes to your load if you meter, and your load itself is changing all the time. So the typical home, right? So as you can see, both of these spiky, there's stuff happening, very difficult to match. They're both what we call stochastic. So we now put some maths to it. So we see that the solar trace is S of T, so solar, if you have C panels, you multiply that by C. So your solar case kind of expands the factor of C. That's the number of panels you're putting in. The direct power is Peter, and then you're putting the charge PC into the battery, you have B units of storage, and the current state of charge is small b of T, and you discharge it with this value over here, and the load is this capital D demand of T. So we assume we know S of T and D of T for now. I'll explain how we get that in a minute. So then what we want to do is the loss of load probability is a probability that the direct and the direct here plus this is less than the demand. So that probability is the probability you have to buy from the grid, right? And that's your loss of load probability. And then the other one here is the operating policy, which is to decide when you charge, when you discharge, you decide PCP and VD. That's basically mathematically what we do. So what's the performance target? We want to basically build a system that meets most of the load most of the time. That's about the best we can do because we don't know the future exactly. It might be 5 sunny and cloudy days in a row. What can you do about that? And so the probability that the system meets theta fraction of the load over any fixed lifetime period, whatever, because this is sort of this is we translated mathematically saying this is the fraction of the load I'm going to meet theta. And then over any fixed length of time, you want to the gamma, meet these gamma, probability is bounded by gamma, or if you want to write it mathematically, it's this. So this is the total amount that you're going to get, and the probability exceeds theta fraction exceeds gamma over here. So, but the problem is it's coupled. This is what makes life very hard. If I place my panels incorrectly, or in a bad way, I'm going to place it next to a chimney, let's say. Then let's say we put the panel over here, the chimney is over here. So during some parts of the day, the chimney is going to cast a shadow on the panel. When it casts a shadow, my solar goes down. But when you have shadow, you're producing nothing, right? So if you have not enough placement of your, or not enough production, then you need more panels. Because you have shadow, right? If your tree, and parts of the tree may shadow half of your panels, you need more panels overall. And if you put more panels, well, that fixes sizing. And then depending on the sizing, you have to do the operation, because if you're more solar, you're just able to charge or discharge, you're not shadowed, what do you do? So these 3 problems are all coupled with each other. And that's something we basically don't have. Solving coupled problems is always a pain. You always try to decouple things, and in this case, they're intrinsically coupled. So what we want to do is to solve this. And so the way we do it is to kind of attack it one bit at a time. So the first thing we do is, okay, let's, okay, this is fun. So what we're going to do is we're going to essentially compute the best operating policy for each size of a panel. And, and you figure out the placement data. So what I'm going to do is, if I give you 5 panels, how should you operate it in terms of charge and discharge? What I'm going to give you is the input solar and the demand trace pair, which is the sort of fixed length periods. Think of them as 30-day periods or 100-day periods. I'm going to give you the trace, and I'm going to give you the target, your quality of service target, and the operating policy. So this is when I'm going to charge, I'm going to discharge. So I'm going to nail that down, the policy down. And for example, the policy might be whenever you have excess solar overload, put it in the battery. Whenever you have less solar, then load, discharge the battery. That would be a simple, obvious charging policy. It gets more complicated if you can buy and sell from the grid. Then when say, okay, charge the battery when the grid price is low, sell it back when the grid price is high, for example. But that operating policy has been specified. If you do this, then for each given size of the battery and number of panels, you can simulate the process of the power flow into the system, because you know this is how much comes in. My policy tells you where it's going. It's going to the battery, it's going to the load, right? So I say this time step is what happened. And then at the end of the time period of simulation, I can tell you how much money, how much I got from the grid, which is the target. And then I do that again for a different value of B and C. And then I see how much it is. So what happens is that you can see that during the simulation, I'm going to give each value of number of cells, solar panels, and the battery. I can tell you which of these meet the target loss of flow probability, and the smallest one that does that. And then we find that basically there's going to be a trade-off between B and C. So what that means is if you have a larger battery, you need smaller solar capacity. If you have a smaller solar battery, you need larger solar capacity. Okay. Why would that be? Why do you think that would be the case? Why is there a trade-off between B and C? Yes, so let me explain how that works. So let me assume for a moment you turn on your fridge, right? You're going to get a peak amount of load, like a spike. That spike in the power has to be met from somewhere, right? Either it's going to come from my solar, it's going to come from the battery, right? If my solar is small, then the battery is going to be large enough, discharge enough to meet that amount of load for that period of time. Whereas if solar is large enough, I'll just meet that from the solar, and the sun is shining, obviously. So I can trade off a little bit of battery for a little bit of solar. And so what you get essentially is a BC pair that is meeting this load. And so what it looks like, and we explain it visually like this. So let me show the picture here. We basically have a set of number of cells on the x-axis. This would be battery cells, kilowatt hours, and the number of PV panels on the y-axis, such that all of these actually have the same performance, same loss of load probability. So it's not a unique point, it's actually a Pareto frontier. Set of points such that you anything to the left or below will not meet the loss of load probability. Everything above is going to always meet it. There is oversized, and this is exactly the frontier. We can discover the frontier using many simulations being run one after the other.
So this is assuming that each of the sources can instantaneously react to load.
Yes, of course, everything does, right? Batteries
But they do
batteries instantaneous and PV.
But if you had any other ones, then you'd have to also add in higher order assumptions on it.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, the only things which have memory are gyroscopes, but not used in practice. So basically, battery compressed air doesn't memory, you don't need to worry about it. So that's a good point, yeah. So this is the single root sampling algorithm. So now if I have this algorithm, I can find this, but this is not going to be robust. So what I've got to do is I've got to actually subsample the load traces, find the Pareto frontier, and then this is what we do with this kind of clever, we find a Chebyshev bound on the traces. So let me explain what that is. I'm going to take each subsample, and for each subsample, I find Pareto frontier, right? So I've got lots and lots of Pareto frontiers over here, right? I can view each vertical line being a distribution, and I can compute the Chebyshev bound on that distribution. And so the Chebyshev bound over here is over here, right? And Chebyshev, but this one, I can't compute Chebyshev bound. I compute it in this direction, and I get two sets of Chebyshev bonds, the green one and the yellow one, and this L-shaped intersection, which is the upper bond on both, becomes basically the robust Pareto frontier. And so this is very squirrely from a mathematical perspective, okay? What we're doing is we're treating the outputs of an optimization problem as points stolen from an unknown distribution. And then we run this. And so this is what I call seat of the pants robust optimization. And so I came up with this idea some years ago, and I went to my colleagues in optimization and I said, this is robust optimization, isn't it? They said, no, we don't do it this way at all. I said, but what's wrong with this? They said, we can't tell you anything wrong with it, but it doesn't feel good. and you know, so I spent quite a lot of time trying to convince them that that it was okay mathematically, and in the end, the best I could get out of them was, yeah, it's okay, but we wouldn't do it this way. But I find it really fun because it's very easy to do this. You can take any problem, and if you want to make it robust, just compute the Chebyshev bonds and the outputs. And treating the outputs as you have to assume that the outputs constitute a distribution, and all of these are IID samples, right? But that's IID distribution. We make IID assumptions all the time, but in practice, it works very well. So if you look at the sort of the parameters, I'll show you the results in a bit. I don't know why I have this right here. Anyway, but the results turn out pretty well. So now let's go back to the thing with the EVs now, right? So I know how to do the, sorry, not the EVs, sorry. I'll show you the next bit over here. So look at this panel roof over here. I have this panels on this roof segment. I have this panels on that roof segment, right? So if I have a certain amount of sunshine, I'm going to get a different amount of sunlight coming over there. But what I've shown over here for you so far assumes that I'm going to have this S of T, right? S of T is the amount of sunshine coming from the panels, and I'm multiplying that to C. And I can't do that because I have multiple roof segments. So what I've got to do is I've got to do this now for tuples rather than the. So I'm going to subsample the same thing as before, and now I'm going to do this minimum cost sizing for tuples of solar. Because I'm going to say, here's what the first panel set produces, here's the other panel produce. And then I'm going to have to do what's called a multivariate Chebyshev bond. So I'm basically taking these curves and then finding the multivariate Chebyshev bond, and easier to explain with a figure. So first, here I'm showing you an example where I have a certain number of panels from one roof segment PV1, another roof segment PV2. So these are the two roof segments I showed you earlier. So for example, this point says I have 10 panels on roof 1, I have 20 on roof 2, right? And then these points over here are saying if I had 10 panels on roof 1 and roof 2 and the simulator, right, what is the minimum cost I found? And the cost gradient is over here on this y-axis over here. And so what we do is we start with the maximum value over here of the cost, which is a large number of panels on both segments. It gives me some high cost. And then I do gradient descent. Actually, we use Alumnus. We treat this like a DNN, and we just do stochastic optimization using gradient descent, and we find the optimal point over here. It says we need about 8 panels here and about 15 panels there. And that's the minimum for that particular trace, right? So it gives me 1 point. All that work gives me 1 point. Now I'm going to take different subsets and I'm going to do it again. It's going to be a different point, right? And each of these points is a tuple. So what I get is what I call the yolk diagram. So I get a bunch of points, right? And think of this as the yolk of an egg. And the Chebyshev bond is the outer shell of the egg. Only in one octant type. You don't do some for technical reasons, only one octant is 1/8 of an egg. Okay. So these are all the points I found minimum cost sizings in terms of tuples. And then this over here, this thing on top basically is the minimum cost point on the Chebyshev multivariate Chebyshev bond. And to our very great relief, it was in 2017 that the closed form formula for multivariate Chebyshev bonds was discovered. And so I told a student, Fyodor, I said, look, we'll do multivariate Chebyshev bond. He said, do they exist? We found out that 2 months ago, somebody published a paper on multivariate Chebyshev bonds. Somebody figured it out just in time for us to use it. And there it is. Now, this actually generalizes to n dimensions. So we do it, with 10-dimensional space. It's very hard to draw 10 dimensions. So we're showing a 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional plot, really. Each point here is the minimum cost Chebyshev bond from one sizing, and that's on the minimum cost sizing, and that's the Chebyshev multivariate Chebyshev bond. So there's a bit of math involved, which is kind of fun.
Where the dimensions is that?
So if you have a roof with 10 segments, you have 10 dimensions. We're going to choose one of that.
Yeah.
And then the gradient descent is going to be stochastic because we don't know which one will decrease by one. So you just try one of them randomly and you find the different ones based on that. So that was actually kind of a very interesting thing to use, the equivalent of the stochastic gradient descent to solve this problem. But yeah, it's just a nonlinear problem. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so let me move on.
One more actually. The root segments are connected, right? So they're not independent. So presumably there's a total amount of sunlight going in there, and it's kind of divided among the ones that you can see in some way for some of the segments. So could you not model them as one segment?
No, you can't, because each have different orientations. So the root segment is facing southwest, will have completely different generation than one facing southeast or south.
Yeah, but there's only one function with respect to the light coming in, right? Like typically you end up with the sun may briefly hit back, but you'll get one and one and one in the afternoon.
For example.
It'll be very also this model is independent.
Yeah. The correlation structure is not
too
complicated. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Good point, though. Okay, so just to show how it works, this example where we show that we expect that we want, using all the math, we expect that we want 90% of the time will be the lowest. So lots of probability is bounded at 10%. In fact, we found that in practice it came out to be what was it, 0.8 or 8.5% or something like that. So, or what is some? I have to remember the thing, but we expected it to be 10%, and we got, or 15%. We actually got only 4% for assuming that the probability 90% we. Okay, let me see. The probability 85%, we will have at most 10% loss of load. That's what we do. The gamma is 0.85. If there's any. In fact, we met that bound using this analysis. So that all the mass over here actually is less than the computed mass that we calculated. So it is shown to be robust, which is nice. What about EVs now, right? So far I talked about solar panels and chargers. What happens if you have EVs? With EVs, it gets messy. And so when the NICE came in last year, I had to this plan, okay, solve it for EVs. And it turns out that it's very difficult for EVs because EVs are like storage that come and go, right? When they're there, you can use them to charge and discharge, depending on whether it's one to do. So EVs come in two flavors. You just charge, you can't charge them, but the bidirectional EVs you can charge and discharge them. And so the impact of EVs depends on how long they're present and so-called charging style. And charging style really depends on whether you are staying and working from home or not. Right? If you work from home, let's say 2 days a week, then you have storage available to you. So you can use it to charge your car. And then on the days that you commute, you use that, right? Or if you commute to work on your bicycle most of the time, once in a while you use a car, which is like me, then it depends on that. So in fact, what we found is that there's a huge impact of working from home. So in fact, COVID made a difference in this. So here's an example. This is the graph that I drew. So the blue bars are when the EV is at home, and white means it's away from home. So here's typical computer. It's at home at night, and then they went to work, they come home at night, go to work, etc. And the weekend, they're home all the time. Right? That's a typical commuter. Typical work from home, they work from home with these blue segments. Most of the time they're at home. Once in a while they'll make a trip to go shopping or take kids to school or whatever. And then the hybrid is that they're home, they look like commuters some days and looks like work from home the other days. And so you get as a hybrid between the two. And this tells us when the storage is available for us as a load, and it's bidirectional whether they can use that storage for something else. And so it makes the problem a bit more complicated. And so these charging approaches also can be different. For example, you might say, I want to charge as soon as I come back home from work. So as soon as I come back home, I start charging over here, right? That's one possibility. This is showing the solar, and then the load goes up when you put the EV over here, which adds to the home load. The other one says, I'm going to charge during the last bit of the night, just before I go off to work. So I'm going to charge at the end of the segment, and then the load goes up over there. Or finally, let's say charge when it's cheapest. And so this is the time of departure minus K, that's your charging time. And then the last one says charge when it's cheapest, and that depends on the pricing policy. So this charging approaches also make a difference. And what we found was, what is the impact of work from home the design of the system, it really makes a difference. So you have to consider commuting patterns, and increase in work from home leads to cheaper and more efficient systems. About 30% cost decrease if you have more work from home. And so that's kind of interesting. And then the other thing we looked at is the potential for bidirectional EVs. If you have charge and discharge, and this turns out to be quite useful. If you have 2 work from home days a week and bidirectional EVs, you don't need stationary storage. You can just use your car for everything. Right? And nobody's actually considered this before. So the reason why I was working on this work from home tool is to basically take all of the literature surveys we've done on work from home to say, okay, how can I create synthetic workload tracers to reflect the charge discharge behaviors and arrival departure patterns, considering the types of charge discharge and the types of work patterns we will have, because there's a huge impact. And going more than 2 work from home days really makes much difference. Of course, all of this is subject to location and individual consumption patterns and stuff like that. Okay, so let's go back to the house over here in the same house and think about one more problem, which is where you're going to place the panels, right? So in this house, what they've done is they maxed it out, right? They put within 5 over here, I guess 10 over there or 9 over there. And okay, sizing may say that you have to do only 6 panels. You could put, and our multivariate Chebyshev bond will tell us you should do 4 here and 2 here, that's best, or 2 here and 4, or whatever it is. You have to do that. But what this doesn't tell us about is what happens if this little thing over here casts your shadow on that. What happens then? So that placement, if this is casting a shadow only on this one, that will be a wrong place for it. Right? So this is a very practical thing you have to worry about. And so what I had Benedictus do is to look into placement. We'll summarize sort of the graph that he did in his work. So what we do is we start with the roof like that. That's the view from Google Earth. And what we want to do is to go from 2D into 3D. Right? And the way we do it is we create essentially what we find the edges, the ridges and the valley, the ridges of the edge of the roof, and then the slopes of the roof, which are outlined over here, that forms a graph. And then you can interactively say the height of the roof is so much, and you can sort of pull it up, and that gives you a 3D roof. And it turns out to be quite accurate. So this is not our work, this is work from some other people in sort of computer vision community who've taken 2D roofs and made them into 3D roofs. Once you have a 3D model, then you have a mesh, and you can put in a 3D mesh. Now what you can do is you can simulate the sun's progression through the sky for every day of the year, every hour, every day of the year. So it kind of goes like this, east to west, and then summer it goes from northeast to northwest, around these latitudes. And in winter it goes from southeast to southwest. But anyway, you can simulate each hour, and based on the solar simulation and ray tracing, given the roof, you can find out over here in this picture over here, you can see how much sunshine is coming on each roof segment for that particular placement. And then we can do an optimization problem to place the panels where you have the most radiation available on average throughout the year. There's the reddiest spots over here. We solve using Kurobi, and that gives you the panel placement. So this was actually his part 2 project. It was very nice. Let me go show you a couple more pictures explain. So this is how we start. We take a picture for Google Earth, and this is a well-known existing algorithm which converts it into this kind of a graph with vertices. And then from that, we go into the 3D mesh, which are shown over here. And these are trees, actually. We can see over here the trees that are casting a shadow. These are imagined trees. And then this is the amount of radiance that's available. Okay, so this becomes these spots which are the most useful for capture. And so when you do sizing, it says put 5 here, we can put 5 here, 3 here, whatever to do with that. And then, and then with that, we can basically compute all of the S and D that we wanted, the solar tracers for each of the roof segments, and that plugs in into our multivariate Chebyshev bound, and that gives us the operation. So it's so basically it's been about years of work, but we've accumulated a lot of understanding of this. And I want to just show one, this is what now. So this is that Anais is working on with another student. And what it allows you to do solar panel and battery size calculator, where you can say where you are, what your location is, how many roof segments you have, what your load looks like, and then it chugs away and says this is what you should, so you should place that. So it's a kind of a joint optimization placement. If you give some inputs on how often you drive, what kind of work from home do you do, etc., etc. There's a bunch of different things, and then tell you what to do. So that's basically what we do. Okay.
So that figure you're showing, like this one. So like when you're in a suburb when you don't have houses nearby, it's just that you have to look for the trees because they're the tallest people. Like when you're like in this very community urban, like have houses and buildings, that's it, like everything that's around for body money. So how is this part of this region will have a lot of people?
That's a Ph.D. thesis, yes. The thing is, what you're pointing out are obvious problems. So, we're solving one problem at a time. Right? Okay. When we first started, we said, okay, we're going to worry about multiple roof segments. We'll just do one roof. We ignore EVs. And then we learned enough how to solve that and make a robust sizing. Then we went to multiple roof segments. Now we've done multiple roof segments and EVs. There are multiple roof segments and EVs and placement, but we haven't done placement for flat roofs, only for sloping roofs. Flat roofs turned out to be very, very difficult. And so I mean, I have a whole. If somebody wants to do a master's project or whatever, a flat roof problem is very, very challenging because you have to put the panels adjacent to each other, and they do self-shading. If you have a sloping roof, they don't shade each other, but if you put them in a flat roof, they shade each other.
Right. We also care about latitude a lot. So we're really, really far north here. We have to get close north of Toronto.
Yes.
So at this time of year, the sun is really, really low. So the incident radiation is way down. And then actually, unfortunately, that's when you want the most local generation, which is winter. So it's a bit unfortunate. So I mean, on my house, where I have sloping roofs, it's an optimal direction, everything's good. I can look at the generation over the whole year. And at the moment, I'm getting a few hundred watts off the roof every day in a sunny blue sky. And in midsummer, I'm getting a few kilowatts, and that's just because the sun is so much lower this far. It's sort of shame.
We're in the wrong
tilt the planet differently.
We should relocate to the Caribbean.
But in your optimization, did you also put in the time of year as well? Because if you don't see different loads,
you need to do the whole year. We do the entire. But in our solar, the solar traces, the rain tracing is done for the whole year. So we do it for all 8,640 hours of use, every hour of the year. And let me just show the conclusion slide and I can ask. So basically, solar storage EVs are here to stay. I mean, I don't think it's going away anywhere. I think these are actually, all three of them are challenging these problems. What I've shown you sort of my work. There's not too much other work, funnily enough. I don't know why. Hardly anybody else seems to want to work in this area. And I think our algorithms are data-driven. And progress. Okay, I will take questions. Yes, this is my question.
Do you think the modeling of the EV as a thing will carry over to heating? So, at least in the UK, my understanding is that a lot of the spillover, the excess that you don't use before going to the grid, is often used to heat the water.
Yeah. If you're electric water heater, absolutely. I mean, so these are all, from my perspective, as home loads. So we could just put them in. But if they're controllable, that's nicer than not controllable. So if we can make them controllable home loads, then we can always take sort of the excess and then stick it into the water heater. But that will help you. So it's basically what's called thermal storage.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of, in my mind, it's slightly different from so we have gas heating.
Right.
So it's kind of the only thing we get electric heating at the water is when we have excess solar.
Oh, I see. So you have both gas and electric heating possible.
Yes, but we don't control the electric. The electric's only from excess.
Okay. That's fine. So I mean, from our perspective, so EV load and the water boat load is essentially identical. It's just load.
Yeah, correct.
So there's somebody else.
We need a solar powered electric guitar.
Well, I mean, technically, a lot of the time I do that.
Someone on that question. Okay. Thomas, can you tell me what the question is? I don't want to lose it. When you go to chat, you can see the question.
So, from Joshua, for the roof graph, what's the adequate level of spatial resolution of Google Earth imagery? So is it 1 meter, less than 1 meter, to extract the economy?
Okay, so the Google Earth engine, so Google Earth imagery, I believe, is 50 centimeters
meters, and that is adequate for us to compute these kind of pictures. And then once you have the 3D mesh, then we don't need Google anymore, because we're going going from this graph straight into a mesh. So hope that answers. So Sachin.
As like John mentioned, that there seems to be like different parts of the year that have sort of like different load requirements.
Yes.
Is there like any possible way to sort of like do this optimization problem, but with sort of like a weighted, a sort of like a weighted requirement depending on the time of the year?
Yeah, so if you go back to requirements, our requirement is basically the loss of load probability. And so this is the target requirement over here. So this loss of load probability, we could weight it by time of the year. But right now we're saying anytime you use the grid, it's the same weight. Now what you could do is to weight it by time of day. So you could say if you have a low period and a high period for price, you could say I'd rather not meet the price. So all of this is completely controllable because it's done by simulation. We're not using like a solver for doing. We're doing this using simulation, so we can make it arbitrarily complicated operating policy and arbitrarily complicated performance target, and we'll still find the right solution. So that's the nice thing that we've done. Sorry,
this is perhaps a slightly tangential question, but I think it relates to the contents of the talk. What is the role of the grid in this? Because I don't know what the situation is in the UK, but in the US, you actually limited in how much solar you can put on your house.
Yeah.
I think average consumption of the household over the 3 years prior to installation. And the reason for this is that they don't want you to constantly be feeding into the grid, because that causes problems for the grid. But of course, this is given that the year-round fluctuation of demand and supply, this is actually not so great, right? Because it means you're systematically under provisioned during the winter and just hitting your own load in the summer. So I wonder if that also figures into the calculation, if you can reflect in these models the sort of how much are you allowed to sell into the grid.
So the grid comes in multiple places. Right? One of them is the maximum sizing that you're allowed to have for your roof. So most countries you're limited to 10 kilowatts. Maybe I don't know the UK. My system is 3.6 kilowatts, John is 8. I think 10 is probably the limit, exactly because they're worried about inflows that are uncontrollable.
Right.
So, for example, in Belgium, they found that there's so much inflow that the frequency in the local loop went to about 51, 52 hertz. It was huge, right? It burns out stuff. And so, in places which are solar heavy, the grid controls a brake switch which prevents solar from getting into the system. And so in southern Australia they do that, in some parts of southern Germany they do that to prevent, in Hawaii, where your grid actually forces the solar to not come into the grid when you have peak generation, right? But still, you have that kind of. The second thing is more important is the grid also controls the pricing scheme. The grid, actually not the grid, but the grid operator, the Berkeley Ministry of Energy or something like that, Ofgem in the UK. And depending on which part of the US you live in, so you probably would be PJM is your supplier most likely. I don't know, or New England Electric probably. But they will have a pricing scheme that will say if you buy at this rate. If you push it back, you get it at this rate. The day prices, night prices, the tiered pricing, and then there are about 200 other pricing schemes that they have, right? Which I'm not going to get into. But the fact remains that this is a huge influence on what is the lowest cost operation for you. And so all of these need to be modeled, and that's why we use the simulation approach rather than some other approach that you are going to mention. Okay. But each jurisdiction and each home actually has a different behavior. So we need to make this a self-service website. We can't just say this is what you should do, because it's extremely dependent on the orientation of the roof, the slope, your expected load patterns. Are you going to have kids? Are your kids going to leave school 10 years from now? Are you going to buy an EV? Are you going to a second EV? All of these things change what you're going to do. And so all of that has to be personalized everything to get this result. So
the rules are different for non-domestic. We are part of a collective that put stuff in public buildings like public gyms, swimming pools, schools. And we just put 100 kilowatt installation from a local gym, which is huge. And basically, they're allowed to sell into the gym because
right above our head.
It's still up there.
We have 100 kilowatts above our head. We just put it over summer. WGB is completely covered with solar panels, as far as I know. But I have no idea what they're doing. I tried to. They wouldn't tell me.
Look,
I need a drone to go look at.
we wanted to put the small data center around up there, but the roof's not strong enough, but it can take solar panels luckily.
Okay. Any other, so I know.
So is there any is there any kind of scale and variance for this thing? So you can take the same system model for a citywide thing and one individual houses, but that are trading things to each other, or even at a smaller scale, the new iPhone can bidirectionally send energy back to smaller devices. So is there any way you could reuse the results of one level of simulation to inform, say, a bigger one or smaller one? Because if you look at it at a high level, it looks like similar.
The thing is, the EVs are so idiosyncratic in their behavior, in their sizes, in their usage. The home load also very idiosyncratic. So there isn't easy to, even the shading, right? Depends on your trees or not, when you have other buildings shading you or not. So everything is very idiosyncratic. So, and that's why I don't think it scales up very well.
So you don't reuse the result, but you use the optimization mechanism.
Yes, the mechanism is able to take also the customization, but it needs to customize it. You can't, there isn't a one size fits all. And so so that's right. In fact, I wanted to show you this one just to explain something. So we did all this work and I showed you what Tesla did, and now look what Tesla does now. So we did this, and this is what Tesla did. Earlier they had this thing, and now that's what they do. Interactive layout experience. It's supposed to show the picture for your panels. You're going to build your own roof. You're going to do all of this thing. So they're actually doing what we think we should do. So this is the change in Tesla in the last few months actually, and so maybe they looked at my website. Or I don't know what it is, or they realized they just can't do it without this level of detail. So there isn't one set of Yes.
I think the problem somehow about the independent house, not very common thing in many Asian cities.
Yes.
Where people living in high building, single building accommodate many households.
Yeah.
But from my experience living there, I found people also install solar panels in mountains and hills.
Yes.
Is this like roof segments set up also applicable?
Yes, if you have single family homes or then you can do it anywhere in the world. That's not a problem because just look at the tilt and the orientation. That's what we care about. Multi-family homes actually is a very interesting problem because hardly anybody can see. Almost all the research is done in the context of North America, which is all single family homes. So Anais's PhD proposal is exactly multi-family homes. So that's the other thing she's doing. And for their innovative, they need to use EV so we can replace those glass windows with solar panels. They look like glass windows, but actually PV panels. Because if you replace every window in a high rise with solar panels, you might be able to produce enough. And we may need to do that in order for people living in high rises to imagine Hong Kong, there is 60-story towers and small space on top. You have no space for solar. And so what Singapore is doing is, if it works, they're going to deploy a huge solar, utility scale solar in Australia and send electricity underwater to Singapore. So, wow. Yeah, I know, really. It's something about it. Thanks, John. Any other? Yes.
Does cloud cover or fog have any effect on like solar panels? Like
again, sorry, I missed the first
cloud cover.
Yeah.
Does it have like an effect on?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So we are taking the cloudiness into account. So when I talk about these typical solar traces, you'll see right away that these traces are for cloudy days. You can see over here. So cloud cover, is incorporated into these typical solar traces. So that's again idiosyncratic. So which part of the world you live in, you're going to have different kinds of cloud cover. And that's why we need to have many, many traces to create this Chebyshev bar. Each point in the Chebyshev, the underlying BC curve, each point in it is coming from different levels of cloudiness and demand traces. Each of these curves with cloudiness and different load patterns. That's why you have so many. That's a good point.
I was thinking many tropical countries, like they have direct radiation from the sun, but they're very like cloudy most of the time. So
so clouds actually help you, believe it or not, because when you have direct sunshine, if your panels are facing south and your sun is coming from the northeast, you get nothing at all.
Okay.
But if you have clouds, you get sort of reflections. So even in its northeast, you'll still get solar production even though the sun is not directly facing you. So the indirect sunshine allows you to get, so you get better production actually. It's lower, but it's more smooth.
Okay.
Any other questions? Wow, okay. Looks like we finished on time. Or are there any questions online? Anybody? Or you can unmute yourself and ask a question. No? Out of energy. Out of energy. Okay, thank you all very much.
Should we take that?